welcome. I am so excited to have Melissa here from, you might recognize her from Pump Mama Pump. And I am just so excited to have you here talking to us about something that I feel like everybody has questions about. How do you pick a pump for going back to work? I'm so excited to have you here. Thank you.
Thanks for having me. Yes, I'm excited too because this is a hot topic.
It really,
I
really is.
work with a lot of exclusive pumpers, which means they only pump and they don't nurse. But I would say the majority of mamas that I work with pump and nurse. So, right, so you're used to nursing. Maybe you've had some trouble at first and you got that ironed out. But now life throws you another curveball. You have to return to work and you have to introduce pumping. And it's just so much learning in such little time. And you're also dealing with a newborn. So, yes, I get it. And I'm glad to be here with you.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's kind of start off with a little bit of an introduction. Do you mind introducing yourself and how you came to be the Pump Mama Pump?
Sure. So my son came a month early, unexpected, which landed him a little stay in the NICU. So breastfeeding did not turn out how I planned. I took breastfeeding class prenatally and they didn't cover pumping, surprise, surprise. So I was all set to nurse and then that just didn't work out for me. So I saw 3 lactation consultants in the hospital. And for those of you who have given birth, it's hard enough to see one. I saw 3 and none of them talked about pumping. So it was the NICU nurse who taught me how to use the hospital pump and told me about exclusive pumping because I didn't even know that that was a thing. And she got me all set up with it. So then I got home. And at that time, this was like 8 years ago, there was only one woman, one line that educated about pumping. I mean, now there are dozens. It has really blown up, which is great. But so I became who I needed. At the time, I needed the education, I needed the motivation and support. So between my 2 babies, I started Pump Mama Pump to be who I needed at the time. And now I can be that for other women. And it's really meaningful, not only to the women I help, but to me.
Yeah, I love that because I feel like that's so many. I feel like as a whole in the lactation world, that is so many other people's story is they didn't get the help that they needed. So they're like, I'm going to be the help that I wanted when I was doing this so that I can be that for
Absolutely.
other people. And it's so unique for this industry because I don't feel like any other healthcare profession. Like, I mean, some people have very dramatic stories and like, hey, this ER saved my life, so I'm going to become an ER nurse. But, most of the time it's not that. It's just like, hey, I wanted to be a nurse or hey, I wanted to be a doctor. But with lactation, I feel like everybody has something that is just so much more passion driven, which I love. I love that.
That's the word I was going to use, passion. You can tell people who are passionate about it and people who aren't. You know
Yeah.
immediately.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. For people who are watching this, they're probably trying to return to work. I had a very traumatic return to work because I had like super anxiety and this was 6 years ago. So it was the wave of the wearable breast pump that just started. So what kind of process do you use when trying to figure out a breast pump for somebody when they're returning to work?
Well, first of all, figure out what your insurance covers. Because here,
Mhm.
I'm based in the US, so insurance covers a breast pump. Mine was able to cover 1 breast pump per baby. So look into your insurance, see what they offer, and then think about what pump you'll need for your line of work. So, for example, if you have access to a pumping room with a plug and you can sit down and there's a table next to you, then like the good old standard pink Spectra would be just fine because it needs to be plugged in. But if, say, you work on the road and you need to be a little more portable, then you're going to have to think about like a portable option. And there's so many great portable options out there, like the Baby Buddha or the Pumpables that still have those standard flanges, but are rechargeable, much smaller, much more versatile. And then there's a job like, say, if you are a nurse and you need to pump while charting, then perhaps like a wearable is best because they are 2 independent motors and you can just stick them in your top. And then there's, a selection within each of those categories as well. So I'd say the first thing is find out what your insurance covers and then which breast pump matches your line of work best.
Yeah, that's such great advice. I was an ER nurse, and so I that's the reason why wearables was very important to me because I knew that I didn't have the time to be able to sit down, at a table every 3 hours on my shift. And so I love that though. There's so many breast pumps. What are the key differences between like a manual, electric, a wearable, and I'm even going to throw in a primary and a secondary because you see all of these terms online. And what's the difference between them all?
Yeah, of course. I mean, I've been doing this so long, these terms are like second nature, and I don't realize that other people might not know what I mean by primary or
Yeah.
secondary.
Yeah.
They're like, is that a brand?
Yeah.
So, first of all, let me talk about like the styles real quick. So, a manual pump is just that, it's manual. So, you have to do it with they call it like a hand pump or a manual pump. You have to manually pump it, which has its place. It's actually one of my favorite style pumps because it doesn't need electricity. They are great as a backup pump. They're great on the road. They sometimes empty you better or more efficiently or quicker, but you have to squeeze them. And often you have to do one breast at a time. So it has its place, but it might not be your go-to for heavy use of pumping. So an electric pump is like the Spectra that I held up. You either have to plug it in or recharge it. Perhaps it has a rechargeable battery within it or is battery powered. There are less of those nowadays that take actual batteries. I'd probably stay away from those, but they have the flanges hanging off of them, which again, for your line of work, that might be fine. I've actually done Zoom meetings pumping with flanges because you only have to see this much of me and no one
Yeah.
knows. But that's not appropriate for everyone. So then you have the wearables, which I call them the coconuts. And they're independent motors. You put them in your bra and they come in a variety of price levels, which sometimes affects how discreet they are noise wise as well. As far as primary versus secondary, for heavy use of pumps, so definitely for exclusive pumpers or people who are in it for the long haul, they're pumping very often at work, maybe even additional sessions before or after work or on the weekends. You want a really good quality pump. I lean towards the Spectras. They don't pay me to say that. They have done me well. I know other pumping professionals that honestly do not prefer a Spectra. It has a bit of vibration. So it's not for everyone. You have to kind of find which one your body responds best to. But that's the thing, responds best to. Sometimes you have to try different pumps, but you want a good, lasting, quality pump to be your primary pump, meaning the one that you use primarily. And then I had a secondary pump. I had the Baby Buddha, and then I had the LV. And those are the ones that I used the most personally. I have used many pumps and I have lots of experience with different pumps, but they didn't empty me as well. The Baby Buddha was fine, but I had to hack it with my Spectra parts and then it worked better. And this is a lot of experimentation that you might have to do. And then I want to talk about the LV a little bit later, but I did not use it effectively. It did not empty me effectively. So you wouldn't want to use one of those pumps as your primary pump because you want to empty effectively.
Yeah.
You want to get the most out of your pumping session. So that's why we say primary, you use it the most. It's your trusty rusty standard. And then secondary, you use it occasionally.
I like how you broke that down. That's much easier to remember. I would remember primarily as primary. That's a very good connection there. What makes a pump work friendly? You see that in marketing. This is a work friendly pump, blah, 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 blah. How do you decide that when you're trying to figure out pumps?
That is so hard to answer because everyone works differently. Some mamas work out of their house, where others are truck drivers or teachers or cashiers. So it's hard to use that blanket term work friendly because work looks different for every mama. The important question is, how does your work support pumping? So again, legally in the US, they have to provide you time and space to pump. And if you have time and space to pump, you can sit down in a separate room, a private room, perhaps, removing articles of clothing in order to set up your hands-free pumping bra and everything. But if you have a job that does not give you that much freedom or you can't take advantage of that freedom, you're going to need the discretion of maybe not having flanges hanging off of you and using a wearable instead. And that's, I think, what companies mean by work friendly. They're picturing you continuing on with your job while pumping, which legally you're not supposed to do. I'm just going to say that.
Yeah. Yeah.
But like you said, as an ER nurse, you might need to do some behind the scenes stuff like charting or what. I'm not a nurse. And if I had a young child at home, I can care for my child while pumping during my work breaks. If like a lot of people work out of their house, right?
Yeah.
So it really depends on what your job is and what pump you need to do your job or to take a break from your job. I hope that made sense.
No, it totally makes sense because I mean, that's so true. That was so important for my work to be work friendly. And I specifically remember a time where I worked 7P to 7A, and around midnight, 1 a.m., my charge nurse comes over and she's like, "Oh my gosh, Rebekah, I totally forgot. You have to go pump. Go, 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 go. I'll watch your patients." And I was like, "Girl, I've already pumped twice." And she's like, "What?" And I was like, "Yep, I'm good." She's like,
Yeah.
"Okay." If I didn't have those wearable options, it would have been 5 hours before I would have gotten a break to go pump. And that would have been really painful and could have really impacted my milk supply too.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, because you're building up all that internal pressure, which is sending
Yeah.
signals to your body like, hey, slow down milk production, which, we
Yeah.
don't want to slow down milk production. So we want to
No.
keep emptying regularly. So those pump breaks or the ability to pump on a regular schedule at work is so
Mhm.
important.
It really, really is. Yeah. So is the output impacted by portability? So like if you're using a wearable breast pump versus a Spectra, do you find them comparable for output as being effective?
So there can be a difference. What can be a real game changer is flange sizing, even for wearables. So when I was using the LV, I got less output than my Spectra because I didn't know you could get a flange insert, or I don't even know if they were available at the time for the LV. So I was using a 24 millimeter standard in my LV when I was a 17 on my Spectra. And that is a huge difference. So of course I'm not going to get the same output. So it's not always just the pump itself. It's, are you properly sized to use that pump? Do you know what settings to use on that pump? So there's a lot of factors that's not just the pump itself. It's how effectively you use it that can be a real difference maker between, like, say, a Spectra and an LV, or a Spectra and a Mom Cozy, or something more wearable.
Yeah. I love how you talked about that too, of knowing how to use your breast pump, because that's such a good piece. I don't know. I had a very responsive body, so like I could just put a pump on and it would just, go. But there's some people that really specifically need, like, how do I set the settings? Do I need to do it this way versus that way? And that can be really hard to navigate on your own.
Yeah, that's why support matters.
Yeah, it really does. It really does. Do you have any quiet options you love? Because I know I'm just thinking of people who like work in offices and they need it to be as quiet as possible.
I used the LV because at the time there were two wearable brands, Willow and LV. It was
Yep.
literally the choice, and they were both expensive and both very quiet. I tell people that the sound of my milk hitting the bottle was louder than the pump motor itself, which is pretty wild if you think about it.
Yeah.
But I didn't need that level of quiet. I
Yeah.
really didn't. I could have used a pump half the price and still had the freedom of a wearable without the price tag. So someone who needs discretion, it might be worth it. And right now it aligns. It's really, dumb to say this because it should be better than this, but it aligns with the
Yeah.
price.
It does.
So
Yeah.
the LV right now retails for, like, I don't know, over $500, but it's got a microchip in the motor that makes it a really expensive part of the motor that makes it quieter.
Mm.
Now, does the microchip cost that much more? I don't know. I don't get into pricing and how brands make their money, but I know that something like the LV or a more expensive Mom Cozy than the cheapest Mom Cozy does align with the price.
Yeah.
I have experience with a few different wearables. I know some of my colleagues, like Kristen from Be My Breast Friend, is like a wearable pro. So she would know way more than me. But I would seek out that information from knowledgeable professionals and real unpaid mamas. So read all the reviews to learn more about the efficacy of the pump and the noise level of the pump.
That's such a good point too. And it's so hard because like you said with the flange sizing, I feel like you read these reviews or you see them on social media and you're just like, this worked beautiful for this one person, so it has to work great for me too. And then they just throw them on, and especially if they don't have the flange sizing, I mean, that in of itself can be a huge game changer. Like, this pump doesn't work for me. And sometimes it's true, but sometimes it's just like you said, you need that support of knowing what works best for you and how to utilize your pump in the best way.
Yeah, and read the reviews, read the blog posts,
Yeah.
watch the YouTube videos. For
Yeah.
example, like a manual pump, I know we're talking about wearables, but so many people say this doesn't work for me. I just couldn't get anything out of it. So I have made lots of videos of how to use it effectively, how to troubleshoot it, all the different issues that can occur and how to fix them. So watch people's videos. I know it takes like a little bit of time, but on your late night scrolling, do just a little bit of research and it will really pay off.
Yeah, that's such a good point. I'm a researcher too, so I love that. I love that. If people who are, especially if they're pregnant, they tell you to pick out your breast pump. I see that all the time on the Facebook groups of like, hey, these are my options. What do I pick? How do parents go about getting a pump through insurance?
I didn't mention it before, but sometimes pumps are available for free through insurance, but sometimes there's upgrades. I upgraded to my Blue Spectra for $50, and to me that was so much worth it because I could have gotten the pink one for free, but this has to remain plugged into the wall, and this one is rechargeable. Yes, they're both little bowling balls, but being able to at least move around and not be parked next to an outlet really made the $50 worth it to me. And sometimes people don't know that they can upgrade. So they click one and
Yeah.
they go with free for the first time. They learn their lesson. And then they either choose the upgrade for their next baby or they end up buying an additional pump out of pocket. So, for example, say they get the Medela pump in style, which nearly everyone hates. They should have just upgraded to a better pump if they're able to, of course.
Yeah. Yeah.
And as far as finding out what pumps your insurance covers, I highly suggest looking at major supplying companies that supply these variety of breast pumps. Like, go that way first and then see if they take your insurance. Because sometimes when you call your insurance company, they're going to give you one company like Aeroflow or something to go through, which has a number of options. But you should know that there are different companies that work with insurance and they might take your insurance too and actually have a different variety of pumps and
Yeah.
upgrades to choose from.
Yeah, yeah. I know there's Aeroflow and there's like One Natural Way. Is there any other like big ones that you can think of off the top of your head for anybody who's watching this?
Can't off the top of my head. Your Google would be as good as mine.
That's
That would be
true.
a great thing for me to research and have as a resource. Thank you.
I'm just here to make more work for you.
No, that's actually really helpful because
Yeah.
someone to curate that list for you would be less research that you have to do, right?
Yeah.
Like we
Yeah.
said, no one
Yeah,
wants to do all the
exactly.
research.
No, 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 not unless you're a weirdo like me who just loves to do all the research. So speaking of the best, is it worth upgrading to a higher end model? So like, I know you said for yourself the Blue Spectra was like $50 extra, but I know that a lot of them do have those wearables on there, but it's like $200 extra to get it versus like a $500 paying for it out of pocket. So is it worth doing the upgrade to a higher end model, or can insurance covered completely do the job?
Okay. I want to say that if you have another pump, say this is your second, third, fourth baby, and you have a trusty Spectra, go for the upgrade. Like get a variety of pumps. Why not go with your standard one? Buy new stuff for the additional baby, the new flanges, tubes, like buy new accessories for the additional baby. But Why not treat yourself to a pump that affords you more freedom? For a first time mom, you don't know if you need it. You don't know if you respond well to it. So I'd go with one that's marketed to be a primary pump, as your primary pump. And then, like you said, if your upgrade costs $200, I would get the free Spectra and then spend $250 for a mid-grade mom cozy to get the wearable. And then you got a pump out of, not out of pocket, free through
Yeah.
insurance. And then you spent that money to get an additional pump. Now you have 2 pumps instead of just 1.
Yeah, that's a good point. I like that. In my head, I was doing girl math and I was like, if you get the $500 pump for $200, you're really saving $300. And then if you spend $200 for the Spectra out of pocket, you're really saving $100.
I mean, that girl math does add up. It does. I
My
could be
husband would
sold
totally.
on that.
I know. My husband would be rolling his eyes and be like, no, that does not count. That does not count.
But I mean, you don't know what you don't know. Like I didn't
Exactly.
know I didn't need a $550 pump
Mm-hmm.
because I did not need that level of discretion.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So I pretty much regretted that purchase. And I would have just gone with a free one. But everyone has, different income,
Yeah.
different priorities. Some people can buy 2, 3, even more pumps out of pocket. But I also encourage you, and this is like kind of frowned upon, talk to your sister, sister-in-law, cousin, neighbor. Maybe they nursed, maybe they used their pink Spectra 5 times and they can give it
Or
to
they
you for
never
free.
did. Yeah. Or they never did. I have so many people who
Yeah.
are like, "Yeah, it's still in the box. I never
Yeah.
even pulled it out." Yep. Yeah. That's such a good point because, I usually say like, "Hey, if your insurance covers it completely, just get the breast pump. Even if you're not sure that you're going to be pumping, it's better to have that. Like you said, you weren't planning on your son being in the NICU,
Nope.
but it's still good to have that breast pump just in case if something like that happens." Yeah, for
And
sure.
my anxiety caused me to already have the breast pump a month early. So I did not wait until after birth to order that pump through insurance. I already had it. And I was really glad about that because I used the hospital pump when I was in the hospital, but it was on a stand. It wheeled around. They didn't let you take it home. So I needed one at home as well.
Let's talk about flange sizing. Why does it matter? And how can someone find the right fit? I see it all the time of like, oh, well, I'm using the 24 and I went down to a 19 and it pinches. So that means I have to use the 24. And I would love to hear your thoughts on this.
Flange sizing is everything. If I could shout it from the rooftops, get sized for the appropriate flange, I'd be crazy. But I would because it's so important. And there have been great advancements with professional development for lactation consultants. Because we have to do a certain number of hours per every few years to keep our certification. And you can pick what you learn more about. And many people are choosing to learn more about pumping and flange sizing because, like I said, 8 years ago, I had a son in the NICU and no one talked to me about flanges, or I mean, pumping in general, let alone flanges. And then you get those lactation consultants who are overworked in the hospital and they don't have time to go over all of your pumping things with you and different flange sizing. So seek out a knowledgeable professional to get sized because it's more than just here, go measure yourself. I mean, there is that aspect as kind of a jumping off point, measuring your nipples themselves, the width of your nipple to figure out what flange size. But you also need to talk about how long it takes you to empty. Are you seeing sprays of milk? Are you in any pain? Like, there's so much more to the conversation. And that's why you want to seek help from a knowledgeable professional. So, for example, and I have my little squishy booby friend
Oh
here.
my gosh, I love that.
A flange that is too large, this diameter where like the shield part meets the tunnel, that diameter should hit right at the base of your nipple and target your milk ducts right at the base of your nipple. in order to get those strong sprays of milk and not pull all your areola into the flange. And if it's too large, it can also really easily become off-centered because there's so much room for it to slide around that you'll empty ineffectively. Actually, you have so many little pores at the tip of your nipple that your milk ducts lead to. And when your flange is off-centered, it's only going to target some of them. So you might have milk left in like part of your breast that you might think is a clog, but it's really just emptying ineffectively. Sizing is just, it's so important. So it's more than just a visual measurement. So if you met with your lactation consultant, they talked about latch and you got that all squared away, and they just look down at your 24 and they say, looks good.
That's not what we want them to do.
That's not it.
No. Nope.
Or worse, if they say, it's causing you pain, go larger. And you're using a 27 when you should be a 17. So yeah, a knowledgeable professional will help you with that.
Yeah, yeah. And then this is just me being snarky, but curious, Melissa, in all of your years of doing this, how many moms have you truly seen needed a 24 millimeter?
I was talking about this at book club the other night. It's a mom's book club. And we were having a little baby sprinkle for one of our mamas who's having their second baby. And we started talking about pumping because why wouldn't we? She said, like, oh, should I get additional flange sizes like now, or should I wait until after birth? And I said that you can, give birth and use that 24 initially. It wouldn't be detrimental. But then you want to get sized after that. And she's like, well, like, I mean, but if it's standard, like, don't most people use that one anyway? And I was like, I have done hundreds of, I might be up to 1,000. I have done so many flange sizings, either by themselves or within a full consult. And I have sized people at 24 or over. I'm not exaggerating, 5 times. Over 24, maybe twice. And that's not making fun of anyone's anatomy, because all of our anatomy is so very different. And there's no right or wrong size nipple.
Yeah.
And there's so many different sizes and shapes of breasts and nipples. But that average should be so much smaller. And pump companies are listening. So we have these big name pump companies who are usually run by men. Mm-hmm. And they didn't have the knowledge back then. So we have that standard 24, and it might come with 24 and 27 as your 2 options. But I'm seeing now 24 and 21 as main options. I'm seeing 21 as the standard. I'm seeing a set of flange inserts now starting to come with pumps so that you can do some sizing on your own. So there is advancement in that as well. But should 24 be the standard? Absolutely not.
No. What advice do you have for parents who aren't getting great output with their pump?
It's a lot of trial and error, a lot of experimenting. Flange sizing is really important. So, like I said with my LV, I would be so curious to get a size 17 insert and go back in time, give it to myself, and try that pump again and see what my output would be like. Because I'm writing it off as me not responding to it, but I didn't have the right equipment. I didn't have the right accessories. And then there's also pump settings. So, for example, since I was a trusty Spectra user for my blue S1 Spectra, there's vacuum, which is how strong the suction is, and there's cycle, which is how quick the suction is, how many sucks per minute. I was a 38, which for Spectra users is the lowest it goes for cycle. I need really slow suction, where some people go the quickest, 54, because they need a bit of a quicker cycle. I have met some moms who need to keep it on 70, which is letdown mode, because they need really, really quick suction, quick cycle number. If I kept it on 70, I'd make nothing. But it's not until you do that experimenting and see which empties you better, that can make your pump that you already have more effective. And part of how I learned that was my manual pump. So with a manual pump, like this is the Medela Harmony, and you do little quick light sucks for the letdown, and then you switch to slower cycle or slower squeezes. And
Mhm.
I found out that when I squeeze it really slow, I get those nice strong streams of milk, and I empty quicker and more effectively the slower I go, where another mom might need to keep that tempo up in order to
Yeah,
empty. And you don't know until you try.
until you try. So, how would somebody know what is great output for them? I'm kind of like tacking that on to that question.
You worded that really well because it's great output for them. So if they are predominantly nursing and it's the first time of the morning, which is a great time to stick another pumping session in, by the way. First feed of the morning, they fed, their baby is satisfied. They maybe wait 5 minutes and then they put on their pump and they get half an ounce combined. They might say, oh my gosh, I have low supply. No, you
Yeah.
just emptied your breasts.
Yeah. Yeah.
So breasts are more, or milk production in the breast is more like a river than a pond. When we say empty, it's constantly refilling. So give yourself some refill time. It's going to refill. You're not going to steal from your baby's next feed. But if you just fed your baby through nursing, through latching, your output's going to be much lower than someone who is replacing a feed
Yeah.
with a pump session. And then, if that's the case, like for an exclusive pumper, you want to focus on that total number of ounces per day because
Mm.
levels can fluctuate throughout the day. You might get a higher volume at 2 a.m. than you get at 7 p.m. because your
Mhm.
body has cycles and your hormones can really affect that
Yeah.
time of day and what you're going to output. So don't be alarmed if you get 6 ounces at 6 a.m. but
Mhm.
2 ounces at 7 p.m. So instead you want to take that whole daily output and the average, and this is not medical advice. Speak to your pediatrician, watch
Yeah.
that growth curve, but the average baby will plateau, breast milk fed baby will plateau out around 30 ounces a day, maybe 25, maybe 35. It's an average. And so taking that into account, if you're an exclusive pumper and you're making 12 ounces per 24 hours,
Mhm.
that's a low supply. You're making less than baby needs. And in
Mhm.
that case, you want to work with someone who specializes in low supply. And say in 24 hours, if you're making 65 ounces, again, everyone thinks that's great, but that comes with its own slew of issues and things to manage. Manage not only the physical milk, but manage time to empty, clogged, inflamed ducts,
Yeah.
perhaps mastitis because you're getting really engorged. So go to someone who specializes in oversupply and get that tailored support to help whatever your individual supply is. Um, and really, the way to gauge whether you're making enough is, are you feeding your baby?
Yeah.
It,
No, that's a
that's
good
what it comes
point.
down to. Not
Yeah.
everyone needs a freezer stash.
Mhm.
And supplementing is okay. I am one of
Yeah.
those pro formula lactation consultants.
Mhm.
So,
Mhm.
and I'll talk about that a little bit more, a little bit later as well. But I'm not anti formula. I think it can help your breastfeeding last, your journey last so much longer. So, if you make less than baby eats, don't freak out.
Yeah.
Get support, see what you can change. But it
Yeah.
might be something like, I don't know, anemia, thyroid, PCOS.
Mhm. Mhm.
There could be so many things going on in your body, your prolactin levels that's not supporting lactation that you have no control over.
Yeah. 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 That's such a good point. How do they know if it's their pump or if there is something like anemia, PCOS, things like that? Like, I mean, is there anything that they can trial themselves, or is it just kind of what you talked about of just you got to find support?
Um, I mean, support's always good,
Yeah.
but doing everything within your control first. So experimenting with the pump settings, getting size for a flange, trying a different style pump, like trying a manual pump, trying a different brand pump. Like we said before, with the Spectra has vibration, but the pumpables doesn't. So see if your body just likes a different style pump or a different style suction. So do some troubleshooting yourself, and then speak to your gynecologist, speak to a lactation consultant, maybe get a panel of blood work done and see if there's things going on that's not just your pump. Oh, also make sure your pumping accessories are changed out. So I say that the flange, like the hard plastic stuff, rarely needs to be replaced unless it's cracked or warped,
Yeah.
which has happened to me. But I say the wiggly things need to be replaced more often. So the valve that controls the suction. I know I talk
Yeah.
about flanges a lot, but that little duckbill valve, or for Medela, it's a valve and membrane. Again, the wiggly part. This should be replaced pretty frequently if you're an exclusive pumper. Or for Spectra, not everyone knows what I mean when I say valve. This duckbill valve on a Spectra, it's a wiggly part, right? This should be changed monthly for exclusive pumpers, maybe every 3 months for a occasional pumper. But check your parts. Here, the backflow protector, this membrane here, wiggly. Replace it. Tubes. I have had a surprising number of moms with cats, and their cats love their tubing or even their babies, and they bite it and they claw it and they make like micro tears in the tubing, which can affect suction, right? You're not even thinking about that. So change out all your accessories and see if that was the issue. So it might not be the pump, it might be your accessories. So do a bit of troubleshooting on your own, and then, see if there's something deeper going on.
I love that so much. That's such a good point. What kind of tips do you have if they are pumping in shared spaces or on the go, like they're in the car or they're in between meetings? What kind of things do you usually suggest?
Well, get the Ceres Chill. Duh. I mean, but honestly, honestly, it's a great product. Find products and hacks that just make your life easier. So you might not have a chance to, to individually bag or bottle up all your milk and then, put it in something and in the staff fridge, which is gross and has people's leftovers. You might not trust it. You might not know where it is. You might not have quick access to it. And you don't want to just leave those bottles on your desk or in your locker. Products like the Ceres Chill make your life so much easier.
Yeah.
They protect your liquid gold. They protect your milk. And there's other products out there that help. And then when I say hacks, this is taking my lactation professional hat off and putting my mom hat on. The fridge hack really helped at work. So am I even allowed to talk about that?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
We're all about parents making their own choices.
It's such
with
like
the information. Yes.
So for those of you who don't know, the fridge hack is, so say I had a Ceres Chill, the milk chiller, right? I have that fresh core of ice. I pump, I undo my bottles, get my bottle. I undo my bottle. I put my freshly pumped milk in the Ceres Chill, and then I don't rinse anything because rinsing can just introduce bacteria, right? I put it back. I mean, I tap it out. I put it back on. I always like to use either a baby wipe, a Cottonelle wipe, or a Medela wipe. And I put it on my finger. So people who are listening, I'm putting a wipe over my finger, draped over it like a ghosty, like a little ghost. And then I stick my finger in my flange tunnel and I twist it around to clean your flange tunnel. This is important because if you've ever looked at your flange after pumping, there's like a little ring of buildup, which is kind of gross and can lead to like thrush or infection. So use a clean wipe to clean your flange tunnel, and then put the whole thing in the fridge. I had a mini fridge in my pumping room at work. I put it in there in between sessions. I pumped right back into it, and then I took everything home at the end of the day to wash. And it was really such a game changer. So find the products that make your life easier and find the hacks that make your life easier so that you can keep pumping during work and that work is not a deterrent from prolonging your breastfeeding journey.
Yeah. I will say for those of people who don't have a mini fridge and you're wanting to do the fridge hack, using like a Ziploc bag to keep your pump parts in is a really great way to protect it if you have to put it in like a
In a cooler with ice
shared
packs
fridge. Mm-hmm.
or a
Mm-hmm.
shared fridge. Yes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
A cooler, a hard-sided cooler with ice packs
Mm-hmm.
is also fine for
Yeah.
the fridge hack. I've worked with people who work out of their car
Mm-hmm.
or who like, I don't know, traveling nurses,
Mm-hmm.
salespeople, sales reps that they need to pump in their car. And then I always, always, always point them towards a milk chiller so that they can keep their milk safe in the varying temperatures of their car. And then a hard-sided cooler with ice packs. And then they put their assembled
Mm-hmm.
pumping equipment or accessories
Yeah.
in there. And I say assembled because a lot of the times I see people take the bottles off, but just put the flange and valve situation
Mm-hmm.
in a plastic bag, and it gets really sticky
Mm-hmm.
really quickly because the milk, a little bit of milk has been trapped inside this valve
Mm-hmm.
and it leaks out all in the bag and it gets gross. So just reattach it and problem
Yeah.
solved.
Okay, so how do you plan the pumping schedule? I get asked that all the time. That's a lot of um, stress for a lot of people. How do you plan your pumping schedule to make sure that you're doing your work, but also getting enough pump removals in?
Ideally, ideally you want to pump three times a typical workday, which comes around really often. And while they legally have to provide you the time and space to pump, depending on the size of the company, you might have to like clock out to pump. It's a whole legal thing. And there are advancements legally to give you the protection that you need, which is great. There's legislature even still in the works to continue to improve that. But if you can't get 3 sessions in, get 2 in. Maybe even if you have to use your lunch break for one of them. Some mamas have to use their commute to add additional sessions. Some mamas need to pump either before or after work or on the weekend to make an extra bottle's worth. The key here is the regular removal of milk. So, for example, my neighbor's milk supply took a major hit because she went an entire workday without pumping, was not only deeply engorged, but like I said, that internal pressure building up told her body like, hey, slow down the milk production, and it lasted. So she really sacrificed her milk supply in order to not take a break at work, which is just not conducive to everyone. Everyone, can't take a hit to their milk supply. So
Yeah.
it's important to regularly remove that milk.
Yeah. Yeah. I like that a lot. So, in preparation for work, you hear about this freezer stash. What do you recommend for building a freezer stash before you go back?
So it's not super necessary. And let's talk about freezer stash. I'm sure the term freezer stash is triggering some people right now. It can be very triggering. You picture a chest freezer, you picture that lid opening, and it's just full of milk. And while that might be the case for some people, it's not the case for everyone, and it doesn't have to be. A quote, freezer stash could be 2 days worth of daycare milk in your standard freezer lined up at the side. And that's pretty much what I say. We didn't say this in today's pod, but you want to start offering a bottle early in your baby's life. And you want to start pumping earlier because you don't know how your body's going to respond to the breast pump. You don't know how your baby's going to respond to the bottle. And you want to give you and your baby a grace period to figure
Hmm.
all that out before you have the additional stress of work. And at that point, what are you doing with that extra milk? You might be offering it to baby in a bottle, but if you pump, like say once a day after your morning session, you can put that milk in your freezer and then have 2, 3 days worth of milk in there to not only leave with a caregiver if you like are away from baby,
Yeah.
but to have for those first few days of work. And then from there on, the goal, ideally, of course, would be to say pump Monday to send with baby on Tuesday, to pump Tuesday to send with baby on Wednesday. So you
Yeah.
don't necessarily need an entire chest freezer worth of milk, especially if you don't know if baby's going to take your pumped milk, or
Yeah.
your frozen milk, which is a whole nother topic.
Whole nother topic.
So don't let those pictures online from oversupply mamas freak you out.
That's a really good tip. Okay, a fun question. What is your biggest pumping myth that you'd love to just bust?
I think the one that gets me the most, like really like hurts my soul, is that it's not sustainable. And I've heard so many people come to me either online or during consults and say, my pediatrician said, if I pump, my milk supply is going to dry up. And I'm like, oh, can I have a talk with your pediatrician?
Yeah.
Can we have lunch?
Yep. Yep.
Because a big myth is that it's not sustainable. A big myth is that when you start work, you will stop breastfeeding. A big myth is if you have to or choose to exclusively pump, you're going to make it 3 months tops. You won't be able to reach your goal, whatever your goal is. Your goal might be 6 months. Your goal might be a year. So that big myth of it not being sustainable is rooted in a few things. People who have not gotten the time and space to pump at work, people who have not gotten the support for like all the things we talked about today, how to use your pump, flange sizing. They've not gotten the support. So they say like, oh, well, my milk dried up immediately when I returned to work. And support goes beyond like actual physical, tangible items like flanges and pumps. Mental support. Do you have a cheerleader in your life that believes in you and supports you and asks you how you're doing? Are you, and I'm super pro therapy. I had postpartum anxiety that transitioned to generalized anxiety, which is awesome. And therapy support. Do you have a therapist? Even if you're not in crisis, do you have an unbiased person to talk about of the daily stressors of life and the stressors of pumping? So support goes beyond just physical support for your pump and your bottle and your baby and your breasts, to like supporting the whole woman.
Ugh,
How stressed are you? Are you getting sleep? All that can affect your milk supply and can affect whether your pumping journey is sustainable or not. If you have a really, really unsupportive spouse who's encouraging you to quit, even though you don't want to, that's the difference. If you want to,
yeah. Let's
by all
do it.
means, I'm
But
not going to
yeah,
make you keep pumping.
no.
But if you don't have a cheerleader in your life that is encouraging you to seek the support and to continue to meet your goal, I mean, that can be everything.
It really, really can. Those are such words that I think so many people need to hear. Okay, so I end all of my podcasts with the same question, and I've gotten some great responses, and I cannot wait to hear yours. So, if you could go back and tell your younger self one thing about breastfeeding, what would it be?
I really thought you were going to say about pumping. Oh, so I have a two-part answer. Pumping is breastfeeding.
Hey,
I would
actually,
tell my,
pumping
oh,
is
your
breastfeeding.
shirt says it. Yes. So I was at a family reunion. My first baby was 3 months old, ducked into a room upstairs to pump. I came back out, and my aunt, who is an RN, said, how's breastfeeding going? I was like, oh, I'm not. And I like held up my bottles, and she puts, like, it almost makes me tear up. She puts she puts her little hand on my forearm and says, you're breastfeeding, you're just not nursing. And she said it, and that's the generation above us, right? So that's pretty woke. But it meant it was a life changer. I mean, I exclusively pumped for my second baby by choice because I was empowered, and I did not feel less of a woman. I did not feel less of a mom. So first of all, I would tell myself that pumping is breastfeeding, just like my aunt told me 3 months in. And then I would tell myself it doesn't have to be all or nothing. So that's what I said about talking about it being sustainable through supplementing sometimes. So if you make less than baby eats and you have to start supplementing maybe with donor milk or formula, it is, I can tell this from personal experience, it is a mental hurdle to get over. And you think like, well, now my baby's on formula, so should I just switch to formula now, I guess? And I was not alone in thinking that. So if I could tell my younger self, like, no, you can do both for as long as
Yeah.
you want. So for my second baby, she had all sorts of digestive issues. So she did well on 50% breast milk and 50% Nutramigen formula, which is like a dairy sensitive formula. So I was a little bit discouraged at first because she was only getting 50% of my breast milk. And then I read in a book, I think it was by Jessica Shortall. And she said, even if your baby is not getting 100% of your breast milk, they're getting 100% of the benefits of your breast milk. And that phrase also stuck with me because it was like the most personalized vitamin I could ever give my baby. And it has those white blood cells. And I mean, if you know anything about breast milk, any amount that you can give your baby that's not sacrificing your physical and mental health is beneficial. So it doesn't have to be all or nothing. It was also helpful to me to group formula into all the other things my baby would eventually eat that I can't create. So when you start offering solids, you don't give yourself a hard time that you can't produce the solids with your body, right? Like I
Yeah.
can't produce broccoli with my breasts.
Thank goodness. I'm just kidding.
So just group the formula in with all the other things that's going to eventually nourish your baby, plus your breast milk. So that's what I would have told myself. It doesn't have to be all or nothing. I actually far exceeded my breastfeeding goal because I supplemented. My goal was 6 months, and I stopped pumping for her at 14 months. Part of that is because she was on formula, so I got to pump a little more infrequently, which freed up my schedule, and because COVID hit when she was a baby, and I wanted those antibodies. So both of those things together made me pump far longer than I ever imagined because I wasn't pumping 8 times a day for 14.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
was doing this like incredibly slow wean, and I was able to offer her fresh milk so much longer.
Oh, that's so amazing. And I love that because, I tell people all the time, breastfeeding doesn't have to look one way to be successful. And
Yep.
this is just kind of goes back to that. And thank you so much for sharing that story because I know that so many other moms are going to just resonate with that. Thank you. All right. So thank you so much, Melissa, for coming and talking with us on Chilling with Ceres Chill. For those of you guys who are listening or watching, we will have everything that Melissa has talked about in a caption. She'll have a link to a blog post that she's writing for us, which I'm so excited to read. And you guys can follow her on Instagram at Pump Mama Pump. And until next time, thank you for watching.